6.5, we're going to jump into special parallelograms, so rhombuses, rectangles, squares, doing that to solve problems. So let's look at these first two theorems, and they're both about rhombuses, and essentially, if a parallelogram is a rhombus, the diagonals are perpendicular bisectors. So a reminder, that means that they form 90-degree angles. And if they are a rhombus, the diagonals bisect a pair of opposite angles. Remember, bisect means kind of just to like split evenly. So if we zoom and kind of look at this rhombus, and I can see that each vertice has been split into two angles, and they are congruent angles. So this blue line divides angle 1 and 2, they are congruent, divides angle 3 and 4, they are congruent, and so forth. Let's do some problems with some rhombuses. And also, just a reminder, rhombuses, they are a four-sided figure. All four sides are congruent. They just don't all have 90-degree angles, so they're not a square. The angles are like too acute and too obtuse, but they do have four congruent sides. So let's look at this rhombus, ABCD, and we want to find this blue angle ADE. We do not know what ADE is. So as we always do, let's look at the shape that we're given and try to determine what can be determined from this. What is this information giving us? And we're given that BAE angle is 53 degrees. And that's all the information we need. Because as we just learned, the perpendicular bisectors bisect these angles evenly. So if BAE is 53 degrees, then EAD also must be 53 degrees. So now we can view AED as its own little triangle, AED, where this is 53 degrees, this is unknown, but we also know that the diagonals of a rhombus are perpendicular bisectors, so this angle E here has to be 90 degrees. Now you can use what you know about triangles, that all angles add to be 180, to know that we have 53 plus 90 plus our unknown must equal 180. So let's go ahead and solve for that. 180 minus 90 minus 53. Our unknown angle, so the measure of angle ADE, must equal 37 degrees. Let's talk about the sides. We know all the sides are congruent, so in this quadrilateral GHJK, it tells us it's a rhombus. We can see that all four sides are congruent. They have those tick marks, and it wants to know what GH is. So we want to find side length GH, and we are not given anything about that, but we do know that HJ is 3x plus 1, and since all these sides are congruent, GH has to equal HJ, which means that it also equals 3x plus 1. We do not know what x is, so we can't really do much with that right now, but we do know that these perpendicular bisectors are split evenly. One side is 2x plus 3, the other side is 4x minus 7, and those two must be congruent. So we can say 2x plus 3 equals 4x minus 7. And we can go through and we can solve that equation. If we subtract the 2x, we end up with 3 equals 2x minus 7. If we add the 7, we have 10 equals 2x. If we divide by 2, we have 5 equals x. So I can now substitute that back in, and I'm going to find that GH equals 3 times 5 plus 1. So side length GH must be 16 whatever units long. Let's look at some things about rectangles. So if we are a rectangle, we have two sets of congruent sides with four right angles, and the diagonals are congruent. Here they are not perpendicular, they're just congruent. So BD is congruent to AC. Let's use this to help solve a problem. We want to look at this rectangle. We have rectangle ABCD, and we want to find the unknown side length AC, this diagonal. Let's look at the information we're given. We're given that one part of our rectangle BC is 7, the other part of our rectangle CD is 11. That's all we've been given. But we do know that rectangles have 90-degree angles at their vertices. And so let's remind ourselves of something that can be really useful here, that Pythagorean theorem, that a squared plus b squared equals c squared for any right triangle. Because we can look at the information we're given as its own little right triangle, B, C, D, where we have B, C, D. We have this side is 11, nope. This side is 7, this side is 11. We have our unknown hypotenuse. We know that this is a 90-degree angle because it is a rectangle. And now we could figure out what this diagonal BD is. And since we know that the diagonals are congruent, if we know BD, then we also know AC. So let's set up our Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where the side legs are 7 and 11. So that's 7 squared plus 11 squared equals c squared. And 7 squared is 49. 11 squared, we add those together and we end up with 170 equals c squared. Our very last thing to do is we have to undo that squared because we want to get the variable c by itself. The opposite of something squared is a square root. Those are opposite operations. So we can take the square root of both sides and we can state that c, this unknown side, which is really, if we're remembering what we're solving for, AC, side length AC, is the square root of 170. And this is where you have to pay attention to your directions of how to write your answer. It might want it in radical form, it might want it rounded to a certain decimal place, and we need to know that. Or maybe it just wants you to keep it as the square root of 170. And the square root of 170 is 13.0384, blah, da, 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 da. If I wanted to round this to 2 decimal places, we could call it 13.04. If I needed to round it to 1, it would just be 13. So you have to pay attention to what the directions say. Make sure you read your directions for how to submit things. Last problem. Let's look at this rectangle, and we want to find the angle measure of our blue unknown angle RVS for rectangle QRST. All right, pay attention and let's see what we know. They tell us one solid thing. They tell us that angle VQT is 38 degrees. And that's not even part of the triangle that we're looking for within this rectangle. So let's dive in and let's see what we can figure out. And my hint to you is angle RVS is congruent to what angle? If you said QVT, you remember what vertical angles are, which is our reason why. They are vertical angles, so they are congruent. All right, so now I know that this orange angle is congruent to my unknown. So in reality, if I can find that angle, I know my answer. Now let's imagine this as just triangle QTV. QTV, where this is 38 degrees. We are looking for this. Now here, you guys, can we figure out this angle T? Do we know what that angle T is? Yes, we do, because this is an isosceles triangle. These side lengths are congruent because the bisectors are congruent. All pieces of them are congruent. So our unknown angle must also be 38 degrees. We know all angles in a triangle add up to be 180. So 38 plus 38 plus our unknown has to equal 180 degrees. So if we do 38 plus 38, we get 76. And if we do 180 minus 76, our unknown angle is 104 degrees. So to formally answer this question, angle RVS must equal 104 degrees. Rewind and watch this as needed. If not, head to that practice